In the digital age, social media has revolutionized political campaigns and voter engagement. Platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and others have become essential tools for political communication. They allow candidates to reach a wider audience and engage with constituents in real time. However, the influence of social media on elections is a double-edged sword. While it has the potential to increase voter engagement and democratize information, it also raises concerns about misinformation, data privacy, and the ethical use of digital strategies. The viral nature of social media can amplify both positive messages and harmful falsehoods, profoundly impacting public opinion and electoral outcomes. Today, we will explore the complex role of social media in elections, discussing how it shapes political campaigns, influences voter behavior, and affects the democratic process. We will also address the challenges and opportunities that arise from this powerful medium and consider measures to ensure its responsible use in the electoral context. Jonas Mbambo, joined by Peter Mbwale, the sign language interpreter for this evening. Welcome to Situation Critical. For tonight's discussion, we have Graham Hopwood, the Executive Director for the Institute for Public Policy Research, or IPPR. In the middle, we have Ilke Platt, the founder of Poya Media and Communication Specialist. And lastly, but not least, Nupresh Soni, an internet entrepreneur and digital development strategist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and good evening.
Great. Good evening.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Ilke, let's perhaps start off with you.
Sure.
Yeah, the rose among the thorns.
There we go. Under the spotlight.
Yeah. Just give us a general observation of the role of social media in shaping public opinion, and now that we are in an election year, in recent year, how has it evolved?
Yeah. I think in order to place things in perspective, households should, number one, understand the magnitude, understand numbers that we're talking about, because when we say social media, it's very generic in general. So over 700,000 users on the internet, especially online platforms, were reported recently now in the year 2024. In February, most of those as well, predominantly on Facebook. We now have the Instagram that's also now over close to 500,000 usage, with your X seeing probably over 90,000 usage on that. So we can see that it is dominating in all aspects. When it comes to the elections itself, I think let's narrow it down. With every single social media platform, there's a voice, there's a perception, there's an opinion, and there's influence. Prior to us being on air, it was a discussion by saying, how do we convert the voices, the followers, to the voters' elections, right? And that's still the difficulty that we have in a Namibian context. When we look at the social media campaigns, we've seen a lot of political parties using the influencers a lot, but also trying to be mindful on who you align the brand with. We've also seen a lot of the political presidential candidates making use of these platforms. It's more like having their own brand being now promoted to the upcoming election. So there has been a boom, a lot of usage on online platforms, and I think we're embracing it more as Namibians to make sure that we give influence and, you know, convert the followers to the voters.
You know, votes. Absolutely. Graham, talk to us about the public policy aspect, you know, your observations over the years. Obviously, IPPR does publish, you know, every once in a while information regarding to the usage of social media. Is it, you know, being properly used? Is the government allowing the free use of these platforms? Talk to us about that. But and also, like, just an emphasis on the election periods.
Yeah, well, just to come back to what Ilke was saying, I don't think the political parties are really anywhere near fulfilling their potential in terms of, you know, their use of social media. So I was looking at the numbers today, and the candidates and parties really have quite relatively low numbers of followers when you consider the high numbers that Ilke just mentioned in terms of Namibian users of these platforms. So there's a whole load more work that social media parties could do. You see them spending money on quite nice short videos and graphics, but then, you know, they're maybe only reaching a few thousand people. So I think they probably need digital strategies like Rupesh to advise them a bit more about how to do better. But in terms of the policy issues, I mean, you know, Namibia is free and open, really, and this pretty much applies to the use of the social media. We have a lot of laws in development, like cybersecurity and data protection, that haven't yet come to Parliament, haven't yet been finalised. And CRAN is also talking about social media regulation policy in the future, but nothing yet really coming near to fruition. So it's a fairly open, and obviously then open to abuse as well as freedom of expression. So it's good in some ways, but we probably do need some guidelines, some codes of conduct, and some regulations along the way. So I think from a policy point of view, we've had a lot of these things in the works for quite a few years now. Probably need to finalise some of these laws and regulations.
Mr. Sonny, you are the data analyst. You look at numbers, and from those numbers you can draw what's happening. And we know that this year, it's election year once again, and the king and queen makers are the youth. So when you talk about social media, automatically you're talking about young people. How does one gain that youth vote through social media? What needs to be done?
I think, firstly, adding on to what Graham said, the parties aren't mature enough yet to use social media. We don't have guidelines. We don't have access to information fully. And along with the Data Protection Act, if it would have been implemented now before the elections, it would have helped us guide a bit to using social media a lot more responsibly. Currently, look, if you're talking about the youth, most of the youth, 18 to 34-year-olds in Namibia are on TikTok. And I don't think there's any political party that's really on TikTok prominently out there.
Yeah.
And that is part of the challenge. There's a big disconnect between what political parties think might work on digital platforms and what the reality on the ground is. And WhatsApp. We don't consider WhatsApp as a social media tool, but it's one of the biggest social media tools because 800,000 or 750,000 on Facebook is still smaller than almost 1.5 million numbers in Namibia registered on WhatsApp. And everybody has an option to put statuses on, you have channels on, and that's something we don't look at, and that's a big platform that a lot of the information is very quickly distributed.
I would think a lot disinformation
as well, which is very quickly, I think it's 10 times faster than Facebook and other platforms.
Now that you've mentioned that, I would like for you to explain, like you explained to a 5-year-old child, the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Because what's the difference?
Well, I think disinformation is deliberate and often has some kind of malign intent, whereas misinformation can be something that they've got their facts wrong sort of accidentally, but they're not really intending to mislead people or mislead the nation or voters. But disinformation usually has a definite intent, sometimes to cause confusion, sometimes the intent is supposed to be humor, but it has a negative effect as well. Whereas misinformation is more kind of accidental without malice really behind it.
If you look at it in political context or elections context, you always see the word disinformation more than misinformation because it's intentional. It's deliberate efforts to derail defame the other parties, and it often comes from anonymous sources. But it's very quick to go out, and once it's out there, before you have time to fact check it or tell people, people already believe it because it aligns with some of the people's thinkings, and that is also a big challenge, is to have information that kind of, first you guide people on what misinformation is, what disinformation is. Is the information different than what you're thinking? And if it is, how do you accept it? And those kind of train of thoughts is not something we openly talk about, because you see on Facebook and social media, people are very quick to criticize, but almost never people are ready to accept the argument.
But to add on that, even with misinformation, your audience or critics are more able to give empathy because it was a mistake. And the disinformation, you're deliberate about it. So even with your target market, you're not going to have a good image within the next 6 to 12 months, and it'll take more of that kind of brand equity buy-in from the person that now has a negative image of your political party.
Talking about image and how you should position yourself in social media, we've seen it in the more Western countries, even in neighboring South Africa, we're seeing it as well. People hiring people who know what they're doing on social media, so you don't have a Trump situation where this guy wakes up at 3 o'clock and just, posts.
Randomly retweets by accident.
what should I not do if I'm running for public office or I'm leading a party that stands a chance, or at least we think stands a chance in winning a seat or two? What should we not do on social media? What should I not do?
Yeah, I think it's the do's and don'ts of social media. And Graham, you're right. There is a far way to go. But let's also look at the strides where we have come from to those that didn't even embrace online media. And if we look at the older generation, they're scared of this, but now they're embracing it because they see the power that they have because of the youth that are 24/7 online.
Absolutely.
So some of the basic do's for anyone, even in election office, get the experts to do it. Like Rupesh said and Graham said, you need to have people running it. You're running an office. Let them run the online positioning. You don't have to be on every single platform. I think with TikToks, we think that because everybody's on the notion and we think it's a trend, that there's a force that you must. You need to analyze your political campaign, who the target market is. Let's also not isolate that apart from us praising online social media, the majority that are voting from rural areas still highly depend on radio and your traditional print. So if we're thinking about the conversion on the people that actually queue up to vote, let's also be mindful on the intentions of the platforms. But having said that, you need to make sure that your brand positioning is consistent. We see a lot of those that go one day they're in the news for the good reasons, and then all of a sudden there's a new brand positioning. So consistency must be on the agenda. Also, authenticity. You need to be authentic with what you say. People can come back tomorrow and say that you promised everybody $1,500 per month if I'm elected in office. I'm just saying, you need to be authentic and you need to fulfill. Once you've said something online, you can't delete, you can't erase, because the memory remembers a lot. So that's one thing overall. And I think those that are the face of a political party, they should know that their private brand equity remains the strongest as well. When you look at surveys, let's say CEOs of companies, they have over 45% influence on a purchase power of an organization. So presidential candidates should be very, very mindful of their private capacity of branding as well as the let's say, their party itself.
Let's simplify that. If I'm running for president, for example, and obviously I'm representing a party or I'm an independent candidate, does that mean that I can't run my own private Facebook page or Twitter page showing the world that, hey, look, I'm fishing. I'm a normal guy. I'm a guy like you. Vote for me. Or how does it work? Do I separate myself from...
You have to separate state from the person. Yes. And I know our late president did a great job of that on social media. If there was events that he was involved in as him, it would always be on his private page. It wouldn't be misused on presidency page. And I think that line has to be kept separate. And that when you asked the do's and don'ts, the ethics of social media, there are different set of rules for citizens or somebody running for candidacy, running for presidency, or a political party, or a company. A company shouldn't be actively promoting or supporting a candidate without expectations of a backlash from certain group of citizens. But we don't see that. But citizens also, a lot of times you work for the government, but you think, oh, it's my private page, I'm going to criticize the government. There are implications of that. We don't have a set of rules around it or laws around it, but there is responsible use of social media that needs to be taught when it comes to, as we get closer, you'll see a lot of that happening.
Yeah. Graham, how dangerous is that, this point that Rupesh just made of saying that we don't have laws around this? So I can just...
Well, it is dangerous, but there are examples in Namibia historically of the libel law. If you issue defamatory statements about somebody on Facebook, for example, it's regarded as publication, it's public. So there have been a few cases in Namibia, people being found guilty of libel, of defaming somebody because of something they published on Facebook. So there are some boundaries, I think. And then the digital platforms themselves, I mean, Nupesh knows more about this, but they also impose their own rules, of course, and they can ban you or suspend you if you transgress. Sometimes it's not done very fairly, but Facebook, we were talking about this earlier, has some rules around political content, and when you post on political content, and if you want to advertise, you should really get their permission first. If you want to advertise political content on Facebook, so it's not a completely anarchic situation, but a lot of this at the moment puts the onus on education, if you like, civic in media or social media literacy education, which really all of us have to be involved in. So I think there's a big burden on the political parties themselves to educate their party supporters about how they can support their party positively on social media, but not indulge in trolling and hate speech and abusive language, which might even incite violence. So they have a responsibility to educate their supporters and to also, to some extent, control their supporters.
But whose responsibility should that be then? If on social media, for example, 100 followers are preaching the same message. I mean, you can't take 100 people to court now, can you? Saying, I'm supporting Jonah's party and Sonny's party sucks and all that. What are you going to do to us? Where are you going
That's going to happen. But if you make a false claim about somebody, accusing them of a criminal activity they didn't ever do, you could be targeted.
It's all about the evidence, Jonas. If you can't show the evidence in the court of law, you need to prove yourself innocent. And you're right, we've been seeing everybody being dragged to court, left, right, and center. Yeah. It's like now it's an in thing for you not to mention my name because I'm going to take you to court. And it's being done so much more often because brand reputation is so important, because that takes away so much credibility, and that goes along with your whole political campaign.
No, absolutely. Look, it's also very difficult to prove that it's you online.
Yeah.
It is.
True.
Even though it's your photo, it might be somebody else posting.
Yeah.
How do you prove that it's your account? Facebook is not going to give you that information. So that's part of the challenge. And this is why it was so important with WhatsApp. Because of SIM card registration, it does help a lot now. Because if you have to identify if it's an unknown number sending you a fake message or something, a video, at least you can identify who it is through the legal channels. Go to the police, get a complaint, find out who it was through the SIM card registration. So at the end of the day, these smaller steps will help us curb a lot of the issues. But it's a long way ahead, because if you look at India, they're having the elections just now. It's a big challenge.
You're talking about over 1 billion people.
We're talking about 900 million registered voters. Wow. 5.5 million machines. That's more than people here. So, so Namibia, it becomes easier to identify who it is or take legal action against someone because of the smaller community we have. It's easy to identify, have mutual friends. Okay, it is this person. Let me make an example. It's easier to take action, but people still need to be aware of what to post and what not to post as we get closer to elections. Because if you look at news articles now, most of the news stories or the breaking stories, I think about first 5 or 6 comments, it turns political. Doesn't matter if it's a murder. They'll blame a political party for it. And it's unfortunate, but that's how it's become now.
There's a fine line between sort of robust debate and contributions and then, veering into abusive, unacceptable behavior. And, I find it difficult to call sometimes, but it is amazing how these comments below the post do degenerate very quickly into insult and strong, weird and strange and often false claims as well.
Let's talk about the financial aspect here and in terms of running a campaign online.
Yeah.
I'm sure many people will agree that online campaign will not overthrow what we've known for years.
Yes.
The big flags, the stadium being packed. That won't go away. The rallies. Yeah. That won't go away anytime soon. But is it cheaper for me to wage my campaign online compared to the traditional way of doing it?
It's a really cost-effective way of getting your message across. I mean, the costs are still really low. And compared to organizing rallies and traveling around the country as huge as Namibia and reaching out to people that way. So it is a really crucial element of any political party's campaign. And as I say, I don't think many have grasped the full potential, particularly reaching young people. But yeah, it's a cheap and relatively easy way of getting food to hundreds of thousands of people.
It's cheaper, but the question should be, what's the impact? Because remember, right now, it's the conversion. So I could be everywhere, I could be online, but do we have that impact? And one of the questions was, how does social media impact this whole electoral process? And that's what we're after. Cheaper, yes, by far. But now the thing is that whatever you sell online as well, it could be cheap, but you need to back that up. So if we back up and promote something that costs us a sponsored ad for as little as $10.99 US, you need to live up to that. And when I said before, authenticity, if we are delivering to that brand promise, that in itself is what's going to take up most of the cost. I know that everybody's now a social media expert, and we think that online is going to make or break. But let's be honest with each other. It takes a whole marketing, PR, communications, stakeholder relations campaign to really buy in votes. It's not easy just to influence someone by saying, vote for me, click there. I think consumers are also more picky because now we have options, now we have choices. What happened 10, 20 years ago when I voted, you now need to convince me, Graham. I just can't put my X, on these different colors because I have promoted it. It's about being genuine about what you're giving, and people need to say how good you are with the service that you're delivering. So again, that fine line between rallying and marketing campaigns, you need to be able to live up to the expectations that you are promoting online, even if it's a fraction of the cost.
You have thoughts on that?
On that, look, if I ask you what's the website for all the political parties?
Did I memorize it? I wouldn't know.
No, most people won't know.
We
You'll
won't.
have to go on Google.
Websites
and it might be
many don't watch.
Yeah.
And that is where the information flow should start, official. I mean, logically, that's where it should be the first point.
Yeah.
You post information there and it gets distributed to your social media networks. Not one of the parties really doing it there.
Yeah.
They're all across the social media platforms. Most of them are not verified, which is actually, as a political party in a country, there is a process for it to do it, but it's easy if you make an effort. If you have that already, there's a trust from people, okay, this is the official page and this is not. And many of them have not done that. So yes, for us to now start using social media platforms or digital methods, channels to start enticing voters, it's actually the cheapest, but there's a long way to go here. I can tell you, look, we have 1 million voters, for example. It's easy to send 1 million SMSs. It won't cost you $500,000.
Would they vote, yes or no? That's the question.
Will they vote? Secondly, we don't have a Digital Data Protection Act, which is passed yet. Because if we had one in place, I could have then taken them to court and said, how did you get my phone number? Why are you messaging me? We don't have that yet. So there's still an open window for abuse. And again, misinformation. What if you get an SMS defaming the other party? Who sent it? And then those kind of things are still bound to happen if there's no control or at least a policy around it.
Graham, people at home, people in this country, or even around the world hear the expression data protection, data privacy. And we're like, so what? I agree with all the terms and conditions of this website. What difference will it make? I just want to join this page or social media platform. Why is it such a big deal in other countries? Whereas some demographics, people don't really understand what it is. Why is my data so important? Why is it such a hullabaloo about saying, "Oh, you can't just take Ilke's data. You're breaking, you're abusing her rights. It's mine." Why is it such a big deal?
Yeah, well, in essence, the worst thing is that it does expose you to criminal behaviour. So somebody can quite easily defraud you if they get hold of your personal details. And we were just talking earlier about how clever the hackers are now to find ways of getting hold of your personal details enough for them, or even get into your Facebook or your website and so on, and take it down, or use your details for fraudulent activities, and somehow even use your credit card details, or if they're in there. So we do need data protection. I think mainly to protect people from that kind of. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people out there in the world, and it's not in Namibia mostly, it's happening elsewhere in the world, that will come in. They'll find through bots and things weaknesses in your system, and they'll exploit them to get your personal information, which you might think it's actually fairly bland and sort of not of interest to anybody, but they could probably do enough with it to create some kind of criminal activity. If not, even the worst is you'll just get bombarded with spam emails and things like that as well. But
educational awareness, that's where it starts. Because like you said, Jonas, we just accept cookies. Do you accept the cookie? Yes, I accept the cookies. But little do we know, there was a brilliant documentary on one of the channels, and it showed what happens in the back end when you accept a cookie. And if you see that monster of a beast of the information and how it triggers it, exactly like Graham said, the moment you accept this, it sends all sorts of information that immediately gives them the right to do anything with your personal identification. That's why, again, when I come to brand, when I come to your image and even everything that you stand for, you need to protect. So consumer education is very important. Educating somebody that even owns a mobile phone. And again, with technology companies, they have a responsibility to say, if we sell this to you, they have a responsibility to know that the person that purchases it knows how to use it. It's like giving this young child, a 16-year-old, a car to drive, not giving a learner's manual, not allowing them to know how to drive, where the brakes, where the parks, where everything is. Something is about to happen. Online harassment, cyberbullying, all of that. So accept cookies is very dangerous.
On cookies, I mean, I can tell you exactly in very brief how it works. It's basically you visit a website for shopping groceries. Yeah. You accept all the cookies. Now the next website you visit, which might be Facebook, because you've accepted the cookies, now Facebook knows what you were looking at on the previous website or the previous 1,000 websites. You're basically giving permission to have your whole browsing history to Facebook, which now knows, okay, you have a car, you're recently married, you're having a kid on the way. So if you actually go to ad targeting on Facebook or social media, it lets you choose to such a detailed aspect of your life. I can say, show this ad to a person who just got married or just got engaged, expecting a kid, just bought a car, is in middle income salary, everything about you, and you will see the ad. And you will think, but how do they know? Are they listening to my phone? In a way they are, because you gave them permission to.
So that was cool. That's what cookies do.
Yes. That's the big deal, Jonas. That's the big deal.
If I was a Sesame Street character, I'd be a cookie monster. Because I've been accepting a lot of cookies.
Pretty scary, isn't it?
Pretty scary. But coming back to how individuals or political parties who are running for in this upcoming elections, how do I determine that my message is actually having an impact on the people that I want? On my side, that I want them to give me a vote. How do I determine it? So I'm using social media platforms. They're liking my tweets. Liking my Instagram posts. My TikTok videos are being shared. But how do I really know it's having an impact?
The problem with social media, and this is a global thing, it's not just Namibia. Political parties don't interact with people as much on social media. They just post. And this is where she was saying, don't turn off the comments. Keep the comments on.
Even if they harass, be transparent, allow it.
Can you imagine a Namibian political party posting something and having to reply to all the comments? From the 1,000 comments to find the 500 voters. Yeah. The amount of time they'll have to spend on that one post to interact and change the person's mind.
And on top of that, you're dealing with bots and fake accounts.
Exactly. Yeah. So
trolls.
So trolls, bots, people who are, once you prove them wrong, they just go offline. Then they refuse to answer you anymore. So those things happen. We don't have enough manpower to actually engage with people on social media. Knowledge is one thing, awareness, but we don't even have enough manpower now to reply to every news story about a political party to say, okay, no, you're wrong. This is the right info. They're not going to do that.
But I think just to elaborate, let's forget about online media. Let's look at the rule of thumb of marketing campaigns and PR campaigns. It's very difficult to assess. Would somebody wear this scarf because Ilka Platt wore it on TV tonight? You wouldn't be able to measure that, right? With every campaign, it could probably take, let's say, 5 years to assess, was this influential or not? Maybe campaigns that happened at the previous elections has an impact on the new person that's allowed to vote this time around? Yes. So immediately, it's very difficult to determine if you don't have measuring tools in place. I don't think many people also respect ROI, which is return on investment. Everybody wants to spam, spam, spam without being deliberate about why are we doing this, what do we want to achieve, and how do we assess that? And the moment we don't do that at the beginning of any marketing online campaign, we've missed the boat. Jonas, I can't tell you that we have now promoted this advert maybe 10,000 times between Monday and Wednesday, and how many people are going to elect. Again, when it comes to the elections, we don't know who's going to vote for who. So it's very difficult to assess the impact of the influence of online media to this social media campaign for somebody to check the box.
Right. But you can use the analytics. I suspect most parties aren't looking at the analytics. But they do give you quite a lot of information. You can see which posts are popular, and which are getting reactions and which aren't.
And for that, you obviously need somebody who understands these things.
Absolutely. But one basic thing I've noticed is that with the politicians in Namibia is that the personal accounts, the name of the candidate and so on, is more popular than the party accounts. So people engage with personalities rather than parties, which tells you something that you need to produce engaging content. And if there's a face of a person you know, you're more likely to respond on that than if it's an image of a manifesto cover or something. So, the personal seems to be quite a positive sort of aspect that they should develop.
Yeah. All right, we'll quickly go for a break and we'll be right back after this. Just tuning in, you're watching Situation Critical. After the break, you can give us a call and share your views around how social media can influence elections or how you engage with political parties and politicians on social media platforms. Stay tuned.
Dawson. Mr. Dawson.
Yeah,
That's him.
Dawson, and then there's a guy from Tsume called Anytime.
Because he calls it time.
Those talk shows where you would have your regulars every single. He had an opinion piece recently, and people were like, "Where's Mr. Dawson?
He lives in Swafford.
Did you see him?
Okay. He seems to advise people on sort of financial issues. So I'm always seeing him offering advice on investments and things on social media.
Welcome back to Situation Critical. Once again, the topic is all about social media and how it will impact elections, or even if it has the potential to impact the elections. That's the discussion for today. And if you are interested in giving your opinion on that, you can give us a call on 061-291-3339. That's 061-291-3339. I'm sure the number's running down here somewhere, so do make use of that. Off camera, Graham, we spoke about the impact of AI and fake news. Once again, coming back to misinformation, disinformation. How do I distinguish? I mean, some of this news, and and when we talk about artificial intelligence, some of these things look so real that how do we even verify it? I mean, there was once again, I'm sorry to use Paul Trump as an example, but this guy was literally going to jail. There are pictures of him handcuffed in the orange jumpsuit on his way to jail. Whose responsibility is to teach me how to distinguish?
Yeah, well, I mean, to check, you need to go to what you think are reliable sites and check, has this really happened or not, or is this person really doing this? Because there was something showing Joe Biden talking about Namibia in his State of the Union speech, and it looked so real.
Yes.
And it was his voice, yet it was a deep fake. And obviously you can check there, he never mentioned Namibia in his State of the Union speech. So we need to be educated, all of us, and we're all in vulnerable to being tempted to believe this stuff. But we have to have this social media literacy where we know that we have to verify, always verify and check, because there's so much nonsense out there, but it's very deceiving nonsense, and some of it is malicious. So that's the only way. We have to improve our education in an election. Civil society, the parties, the newspapers, are all the media in general are all responsible for that.
I can add, at the recently held Women in Media event, we said the more that we're going digital, the more it's forcing us to go back to the basics. What do we mean by that? If NBC didn't say it, it wasn't true. So what does that mean? We go back to the sources, the traditional media houses that have always been reliable 20, 30 years ago. When we verify, and Graham, unfortunately not everybody does that level of research online. The moment they see it on Instagram, Facebook, they spread it like wildfire to 30, 40 different people, because that's why it's so hard to contain and even PR, something that is dissemination of information. So going back to the basics, Jonas, the more we're trying to innovate and the more that we're trying to use AI, it's taking us back to the roots by using the initial sources that we've always been using. So double checking. So we hope that through the literacy and education, people will become more aware by saying, what do I do when I feel or see this message is too good to be true? And you know what they say about that? If it's too good to be true, it's not true.
All right. Nupesh, before we get to you, we have a caller from Mondangwa. Nesmus, very good evening. Thank you so much for calling us.
Thanks, Jonas. Good evening to the viewers. Good evening to the panelists. An interesting conversation indeed. I think for me, what I actually want to sort of say is I want to give a challenge, especially to the media personalities. I know currently we sort of...
let me just stop you there for a bit. I think our sound in studio is a bit too low. Can you just start over again?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. In fact, I just say thank you to you and thank you to the viewers as well. All I want to do is just to throw a challenge to the media personalities, including Health Blood. I think for now we actually sort of putting the ball in the political parties' court. But I think we also need to start a social media or media personalities start creating platforms where we invite political parties to, sort of convince or state what their values and vision are for the younger generation. So I think I'm throwing the ball back into the court of the media personalities once again, to create the necessary platforms to really, engage and allow those guys to engage. Because I think, as the other gentleman said, they hardly really engage, even in terms of what they put out. So I think maybe that's, as I said, just to wrap up, the challenge that I'm throwing around, they could as well sort of market or do whatever they can to as long as at least they ensure that they engage the political parties in whatever platforms. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Unfortunately, the sound was a bit too poor, but I don't know if you guys picked up a thing or two there. But
if I heard properly, engaging media personalities to take the floor to use their platforms to also promote, elections and voters, etc. I wanted to add a sentiment to that. I think in the Namibian landscape, it's more like saying, I think there was a campaign, my vote, my secret, or my secret, my vote. The moment, let's say Namibian artist, whoever, Top Cherry or TD or Gaza, are associated with a political party, anything that happens outside of that space, it's a brand overspill. There's a lot of sensitivity with a lot of influencers that also choose not to state who they're supporting. Or maybe they don't publicly want to wear a certain T-shirt because of the brand association that some political parties do have. So I agree, Nesmus. I think youth should be involved with promoting to vote and who they want to vote for, and it's their right. But there's this level of, the stereotype. I can't be seen with such colors, otherwise I won't get a job or a gig somewhere else because I'm supporting this party. So there's some challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities in the same vein.
Nupesh, I wanted to touch on fake news and the influence of artificial intelligence on the information that we get on a daily basis on social media. So with
fake news, I think there's different levels of education we need, or awareness we need to start looking at. There's a reason Dubai now has a minister of AI recently. They have a whole ministry just focused on AI development, because it is a threat as much as it is a help. And it can really go wrong if in a country like Namibia there is no awareness around it. because it's very quick. You can download an app, make a fake video in 10 seconds, send it out. The amount of time now you need to withdraw that video once it's out there, it's months.
Yep.
It's now to find out who created it. It's part of the challenge. And in Namibia, our other bigger challenge is lack of data. AI uses existing data to give us answers. And in Namibia, historically, we never had public data. Look at the ECN, the Electoral Commission. If you go and ask them, look, where's the data from first election until now? All the data sets, there is nothing. If we did have a lot of data, AI could actually, we can use AI to do a lot of analytics around it. It can even be used for predictive analysis if you had the correct data. But because we don't have data, there's a big chance of it going wrong in Namibia or smaller countries as such.
Well, then the next question would be then, why are we so slow in terms of putting these things into law? I mean, if Dubai is the level of promoting or appointing a minister of AI, why then a law that is designed to protect my data?
It's more about the general situation in Namibia. We are slow with almost every law. I mean, it took 10 years to get the Access to Information Law passed, and it's still not implemented at this stage. There's so many laws sort of stacked up at some stage of finalization or consultation waiting to go to Parliament. And that one of the problems is we don't have that many drafters in the Ministry of Justice working on these things. So, but there are other issues as well. So I'm afraid the data protection, cybercrime, and other things that would relate to what we're talking about are just in this long queue of legislation waiting to come to Parliament, and we don't really know when they will appear. But so we can pass laws in a very short time, because we saw when we were being threatened with grey-listing the anti-money laundering laws. I think there were 4 new laws and 9 amendments were passed in about 4 weeks. But somehow we haven't got the sense of urgency. Maybe we'll be required by some international body or some international convention to pass these laws eventually, and that will speed us up. But at the moment, we're just really slow in passing laws.
Well, what are the dangers of us not passing these laws swiftly enough? Will it come, if it has to come and bite us?
Yeah, well, for the individuals, it just means there is no real, we only have our privacy is only really protected by the Constitution's Bill of Rights, but there's no real legislation that builds on that. So it does leave people open, particularly in the digital age, to being exploited and coming under attack, or just having their personal details misused and abused.
But I think that's our problem. We all wait for laws to be implemented where it should be a personal accountability. Basics in terms of where does my right start, where does yours start, where does mine end. It's by saying that as a national citizen, we should be, as those national custodians, to be doing the right thing. And we can repeat this 100 times tonight, Jonas. But again, if we do not allow such conversations to happen on public platforms, to educate, to let people know the dangers, we're going to be singing the same tune as well. So yes, the law is there in black and white, but again, it starts today. You can do it, I can do it, and if we know how to use it, we wouldn't be discussing about many of the issues, cyberbullying, harassment, etc., because all of us are taking personal accountability.
We have a project called Namibia Fact Check, which has its own website. We're on a limited basis. We're trying to, spot these deep fakes and the disinformation that's being put out there and putting out alerts. Of course, unfortunately, the alerts are never anywhere near as popular as the actual original disinformation. But I think that's the kind of thing that civil society can do. And we're also training young people, young civil society activists, on social media verification and being able to, this literacy that we've talked about, being able to spot, but also try to encourage their friends and their contacts not to just put this stuff out on WhatsApp, which is a particular issue in Namibia. So much of this of this false information is going out on WhatsApp. So yeah, I think it is basically education and personal responsibility.
But where does it start? I mean,
who does it start with?
Yeah, but
it starts with, like you said,
starts with you and me.
Because we're talking about social media literacy. Each and every day, a person in Namibia is buying a smartphone without, like you said, 16-year-old jumping into a car doesn't know.
You're bound to crash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are we trying to recommend here? Should we have a manual of not only how to operate, the thing physically, but not only operate it technically, but also when you are on these platforms that come with this phone, on your Facebook and WhatsApp. These are the etiquettes. Where do I get that from?
Look, I mean,
Nowhere.
it's part of
Nowhere.
it's
Nowhere.
part of, like she said, it's personal responsibility.
Yeah.
You have to start using your common sense at the end of the day. If you think it's too good to be true, if you can see it's fake, and there are lots of times the Namibian, it's a Namibian newspaper headline or the whole image, and it's a fake headline. You can see it's different. You can see
even with NBC. You know?
Oh, we had an issue with NBC recently where somebody misused the logo. I've seen that on. But if I see it, I report it. And if more people start doing that, even if it is other people in media and all, just to take that little bit of proactive step to say, okay, you know what, this is wrong. You send it to the PRO of the ministry and say, please issue something. It's going around. And almost 9 out of 10 times, almost all the time I've seen, within 10 minutes they issue a fake stamp on it, post it everywhere, and it's out there. But if more people start doing that, I'm sure with a small country like Namibia, we'll be able to curb a lot of fake news. But one has to then take a screenshot and send it.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then it's...
And the worst part is even some of ourselves, you know, who are in the media fraternity fall for these things.
Yes.
You know,
It's very
so, some of
easy.
these things becomes, they're so well done that it looks legit.
Yeah.
That you're even so quick to share. It's like, guys, this just happened. They were like, come on, Jonas, really? Can't you see it?
Hackers are the smartest people in the room because they know how to hack despite 100, protection, firewalls, etc., etc. But the moment we don't have a culture of the basics, this whole nation, we're doomed. So without having that culture, it's by saying, clean up after yourself to keep Namibia, now we've ranked down, a clean, country. But we don't have to wait for laws and regulations to say, you must pick up your litter and put in the garbage can. So it should be in us to say, right now, I'm going to stop posting negative comments on social media, because if I were to be face-to-face with Jonas that I'm criticizing online, it'll be a different story. Yeah. So let's remove the screen. Let's try to ask that question. If I'm not able, this is the rule of thumb, if I'm not able to say this in front of somebody's face, do not even post it at all.
Don't be a keyboard warrior.
It's basics,
all right.
But we don't do it.
Now, we do know for a fact that elections have a tendency of bringing out our ugly side, whether it's online or offline. But just as a final word, what would you want to see done differently by the electorate, by political parties, in the way that we communicate with one another? Yes, we have different political ideologies and different parties and all that, but what would you ideally want to see on social media platforms in terms of how we get our points across, respectively, towards fellow Namibians? You have a minute.
I would like to, if you look at the party side of things, I would like Electoral Commission to actually step up, even these elections, to have a guideline. To say, look, this is how we can start using responsibly as party, as a candidate, as a minister. Have just a set of guidelines, not laws, not regulations, not gazetted, but just general guidelines. So at least people know what to do and what not to do, because a lot of times it's ignorance. They just don't know, so they do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a 10-point code of conduct for political parties that's part of the Electoral Act, and I think they need to add a separate clause saying parties must make sure they're not involved in online harm, that they educate their supporters not to indulge in any abusive behavior online that might incite violence or conflict. So, I think in elections there's a big responsibility on the political parties, and I hope they're listening tonight, they need to take up this challenge.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, we can have documents about style guide of using social media, but it will only remain that if we don't act on it. So for everybody that's watching this evening, like we said before, do the basics. Let's respect each other. Let's make sure that when we put out any messaging online, let it be positive. Let's be that positive online content. It is possible. I think everybody now feels that social media is all negative, but let's change the narrative. It only starts when we start putting positive messages out there. And for those that are using online media, especially for the elections, be authentic, be genuine, real, because we can sniff it.
All right. Nupesh, Ilka, Graham, thank you so much for your time. I knew, I thought an hour would fly by so quickly, but it always happens when you sit with people have a lot on their minds. But it's always a great pleasure, and I hope people at home also enjoyed this and have took you know, a cent or two, and how they're going to spend it is entirely up to them. But once again, thank you. You guys have done your job. Right. Much obliged. Before we go, we always have an African proverb, and today's African proverb goes as follows. Don't set sail using someone else's star, meaning avoid copying someone else. Just because someone has been successful in what he or she does should not be what will make you to do the same thing and expect to be successful. Till next time, remember the tagline, situation critical, minds philosophical. Peace and love.